Swift and Tips podcast.
We worked in a medical device company, and you know, when you work as an iOS developer, you maybe have some experience about making an app and then launching them, right? But how that is in a medical project,
Mm.
because when you I mean it depends of what kind of medical project is, but in our case it's something about delivering insulin to patients, right, to people. So could you tell us a little bit, I mean, in your
Sure.
perspective,
Yeah.
how different
I'd
is
talk
from.
another hour about that if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, so this to be clear, this is the first medical device company I've worked for, and
Mhm.
I've worked for a variety of different companies. And you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to look at my experience. But the biggest difference to me is that the just the I say that the level of quality that we require and the level of regulation we're under, but the regulation ties back to quality, right? It's like
Yeah.
what we're trying to do here is so important, and the margin for failure is so small. There's this particular mantra you hear a lot in Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley firms, which is fail quickly, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea where okay, just try it and then see what happens, and then you iterate and you try some different things, and don't be afraid to fail. And I mean that's a great mindset in general, but it's a little different in a medical app. Like we can't. I've worked on applications where we release a new version every week, right? It's a very large apps, and so you're constantly iterating. And if you have a bug, okay, well then that whatever, maybe that person's not going to get their ice cream sandwich that week or whatever. There's like it's annoying, and you know what? Like everybody wants their code to be awesome and bug free and work
Yeah.
perfectly. I mean, it's not that people are slopping on purpose, but the consequences are different when it's something like a medical app where if you have a bug, then someone's child dies in their sleep, right? And that's a much, much, much heavier thing to think about. So that's why this the biggest challenge I see for as a medical app in a mobile device platform is that I think I mentioned earlier, right? The iOS and Android, these mobile platforms, they evolve rapidly, and
Mhm.
there's all on a at least a yearly basis. And so, but medical devices, they by their very nature are conservative and need to be extremely thoroughly tested, and you need to be very careful when you're going to make a change to something that you don't introduce regressions, and which then requires additional testing, and really the amount of testing and documentation load. And it's all because it's so important. It's because if you make a mistake, if you release something that has a fundamental flaw, not even just from the point of view of it's expensive for the company to ensure a
Yeah.
recall, it can be damaging to your brand and all of that. I mean, that's it's important, but also just you got to remember there's human beings out there who could be seriously harmed by the mistakes you make if you make mistakes. Um, so there's some tension there, right? I mean, it's like how do you continue doing the work of software development, which is iterating on things and making things better, in a way that doesn't introduce more risk, but you can't just freeze your code and never change it, because eventually the platform's going to leave you behind and your app's not going to run anymore, right?
Yeah.
And you're not fulfilling your mission either, right? I mean, our goal is to produce software that people use to make their lives better. So that to me is really the interesting thing about this job is trying to balance these two. You need to be able to iterate and try to move quickly but also you have basically zero tolerance for failure. um, and ultimately, I guess in my head that kind of comes back to architecture, right? I mean, like the
Mhm.
key there is to, especially when you first start out, is to try to make as much as modular a design as possible, so that when you do need to update parts of the system, or you need to fix a bug, or you just need to adapt to new features that are coming in the platform, that your system's designed to change so that you can
Yeah.
invest those changes quickly, and not require like the entire thing to have to be retested from start to finish, or the chances of introducing regressions are low. But yeah, so that is I think the biggest change, because I've worked at places where it's like, okay, whatever, I know there's a little bug, but we'll fix it. just keep shipping, just keep
Yeah.
shipping, and we'll fix it. And so
I,
you can't really do that. Yeah.
I've been working in companies. I won't say the names because I don't want to blame anyone, but
Right.
big companies where they don't even test at all. And
Sure.
I didn't even read or write any unit tests, and it was like, wow, that's crazy. But here, you tell me. I mean, there's no code review without any tests, and testing is really important, like you said. And maybe
Hmm.
not only medical, also, for example, core industries. It's in a way of, okay, I mean, if the brake is not working as expected, terrible things will happen. So they
Right.
need
Exactly.
to absolutely review every edge case. If they, I don't know, if they throw the phone from the window, what will happen? Are you going to lose connectivity? Are you going to restart the
Mhm.
app? What will happen if you got a crash? I mean, another company is like, oh, okay, a crash, meh. But
Yeah.
here, okay,
Right. Right.
it's people life in danger or so. So there are a lot of
Yeah,
things
I've
to.
also worked at companies where we didn't, where the software developers were responsible for doing all the testing. We didn't really have a QA department at all.
Ooh.
Um, and so again, that's that always struck me as a strange choice because I think there's kind of a different in mindset between a developer and a tester. I mean, some developers make great testers and vice versa. It's not that they're like completely different, but they come at the product from a different point of view. And I think some people are just extremely good at finding bugs, and that's a talent. It's a talent that should be celebrated, and they deserve to have a career path. And those people, I love my testers who are really thorough and really great, and the fact that they can do things that I would never think of is such a huge benefit, especially for something like this, right? And I think there's a little bit of a subconscious thing if you're testing something you wrote yourself, you may I don't know if it's subconscious or what, you may decide, don't do that, right? It never occurred to you that that, okay, I'm not gonna force quit the app in the middle of this process, or I'm not gonna try to, cut and paste a bunch of poop emojis in the password field or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Just because it's like, something in your brain says, okay, that's a terrible idea, so no one's going to do that. Where the tester's like, oh, well, I can do anything I want. I'm going to try this thing you wouldn't have thought of, or would sort of subconsciously avoid, and find issues that way. So yeah, but unit testing is interesting too. I mean, I remember in a way, it's kind of a new idea. Well, I mean, it's been around for a good decade or so, but I worked at plenty of code bases that have very low test coverage. I don't think that's particularly uncommon, actually, right? I mean, a lot of things,
Mhm.
legacy code bases maybe have, where they have unit tests at all, it maybe not be very thorough testing. And part of that, again, goes back to architecture. There's a certain, when you're writing code to be testable, you may make different choices than if you're writing code that has a lot of global dependencies and makes it really difficult
Exactly.
to isolate things. In my mind, though, I think that good architecture and testability kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, if you have good layers of abstraction, if you have good isolation of concerns, then usually that means that you have clean APIs and clean interface boundaries that you can test, and your dependencies are all well understood, and therefore you can write unit tests of high degree of coverage. And a lot of the choices that we made in our project were driven by that concept that we set ourselves a high bar. We wanted to have a high degree of unit test coverage, because
Mhm.
for both reasons, both because it's a serious product and we want to make sure that it is as bug free as possible, but also because I wanted that synergistic effect of having good architecture being essentially forced on us, because if you find yourself written in a way that you don't know how to unit test it, you probably don't have a good design, and you might need to break some things apart or rearrange a few things so that you can test it.